Let's check. We have j less than or equal to 5 minus 1 plus 1. Well, that's 5. Is 6 less than 5? Less than or equal to, yeah, 6 less than or equal to 5? No, it's not. That's false. We don't execute the output statement. Control passes down to the output of an end line, which gives the cursor down to the next line. And we pass control back up to the outer loop. So I is increased now to 2. Is that less than 5? Yes, it is. So we go through the entire inside of that for loop once again. Notice also that this is a compound statement. Right? We have actually two statements. We have a for loop and we have a output loop. Okay, so I is 2, j is 1. What's our limiting value now? 5 minus 2 plus 1, which is 4. Okay, so this is 4 is what we're looking at. So, once again, we have 1 star, increment j. 2 stars, increment j to 3. Still less than 4, output a star, increment to 4, that's less than or equal to 4, output a star, increment to 5, that's no longer less than or equal to 4, and control passes out of the for loop, the inner for loop, down to the cout of the end line. So I've got 4 stars now. I bring the cursor back to the beginning of the line. It's now down here. And control passes back up to the controlling expression for the outer for loop. So I is incremented. That's still less than 5. So I jump in. J is 1, output a star. J is 2, output a star. J is 3, output a star. J is 4, that's no longer less than or equal to 3 because this expression is now 3. So control passes down to the output of the end line, gives us a new line. We go back up, increment I to 4. Now check it out here. This is 4. 5 minus 4 plus 1 is 2. So 2 is the limit. J is 1, output a star, increment to 2, output a star, increment to 3. Now our condition is false, and we output end line, puts our cursor down to the beginning of the next line, go back up, increment I, it's now 5. Start over again. J is 1. Now our limit is 5 minus 5 plus 1, which is 1. Okay, so we output a star, increment j to 2, that's no longer less than or equal to 1, and we output end line, and what? Go back up here, I gets increased to 6. Is that less than our control? It is not. It's false, and so control passes out of that nested looping structure. And we have the output that we want. Okay, so what we have is what we call a nested loop. That is, we have an outer loop, an inner loop, and incidentally some other statement along with it. To be clear, the blank line here is only for formatting, just to make it clear what's going on. I could have put I didn't have to put that break there, that empty line. The cout statement could be there. It's not part of that inner loop. Not without curly braces. Okay, another goal output. Looks very similar, except what? We go back and look. All the stars line up here on the left. In our new problem, it's lined up differently. Okay, so as an outline, okay, the outer loop is for the number of rows. I goes from 0 up to but not including 5. For the spaces, I'm going to have j run from 1 up to I. That is to say, I'm going to have no spaces to start with, 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 4 spaces, and maybe even 5 spaces at the bottom. Following the number of spaces is the number of stars. So if you look, typically you'll have 2 spaces and 3 stars. Okay? That would be for I equal to 2. This would be the 0th row, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th row. And of course, we get what we want. Now let's talk about scope. Okay, take a look at this loop. All right, for int I equal to 1 up to and including 10, I incremented by 1, output hello. So, and an inline. So clearly what we have is hello once on each line for 10 lines. And then we want to output what I is. Well, when we get done with this loop, what is the value of I? The value of I is 11 when we are done with the loop. I equals 11. But notice that I not only is initialized inside the loop, but it's also declared there. Thus, when I exit that loop, I doesn't exist. Okay? I is out of scope. Okay? It doesn't exist, and we'll get a compiler error. Okay? The compiler will say, this variable has not been declared. Back inside the loop, just as we leave the loop, the value of I is 11. But once we're outside of the loop, then it has no value. It's actually been deallocated. It no longer even exists. Now, if I had enclosed this inside curly braces, okay, again, formatting put aside, because of course the compiler doesn't look at formatting. Now, this cout statement is inside of the for loop, and I does exist. But that's not the case in the original example. So, let's take a look. Suppose I put the curly braces here. Well, that's no different. That single statement cout hello is still a single statement for that for loop, whether you've got curly braces or not. This I is still out of scope. I still non-existent here. Okay? Now, suppose that I put the curly braces around the entire block, and I create I outside of the for loop. Right? So I create I initialize it here, use it in the loop. When I then jump out of the loop, okay, and ask to output I, well, what is it? When we leave this loop, I is 11. When we get down to this line of code, does I exist? Well, yes, it does. Its scope is the entire block of code, all of this. Okay? So I does exist, all right? And we get I equal to 11, and it is in scope. Okay? In other words, the scope of this variable I is the entire program here. Let's take a look at another situation. Suppose that I have declared I in main as an integer and given an initial value of 20. And then inside a for loop, I create I, given an initial value of 1. First question is, will it compile? Is there a problem? We have two variables named I. Is that valid? Can the compiler handle that? The answer is yes. The scope of the inner I, this I, the second I, is this for loop. Okay, so this is the scope of second I. Inside that scope, the second I hides the first I. So second I hides, that's the term used, the first I. okay? So if you want access to that first I, you don't have it inside that loop. Now when we get out of the loop, down here, okay, this is the scope of the first I. Second I is out of scope. It's out of the scope of that loop. So what's the output from that statement? The output is 20, not 11. Okay? And that is the end of this lesson.